AP rights from the Renaissance Early Christian unit. We did the Gothic and Romanesque last time, so let's go to the Renaissance. You want to know Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael really well. Here's a couple of actual prompts. Remember, when you read the prompt, sometimes it's confusing. You break it down into pieces, and this is an actual prompt from a couple of years ago on the Last Supper. And when you break it down, this is what it's asking you to do. Describe how he creates depth. Describe how he represents the figures and visual evidence, how he put an emphasis on Christ, and then how is this typical of the Renaissance. So if you go piece by piece, this is a Renaissance work. So for depth, you go back to linear perspective, orthogonals. He creates the illusion of real space. The figures, you want to talk about the groupings, how he has groups of people and they also have individual personality. Maybe something about how Leonardo could paint more than the person. He could paint their personality. And in this work here, he's capturing the moment when someone's going to betray Christ. Then it says, how is there an emphasis on Christ? You could talk about how the vanishing point is really a window or a halo behind his head, and Christ actually looks like a triangle, which is very stable in the center of the painting. Then it talks about how is this typical of the Renaissance. Again, the Renaissance creates naturalistic space with linear perspective, and that would be that one there. The next one would be on the Delphic Sibyl. Now, Michelangelo, we have 4 images. So you want to know all those images well. This is from a couple years ago, and it's talking about the Delphic Sibyl. So for this one, it's asking for visual evidence, and it's if you break it down, it's saying how does it reference the classical, which means how is it similar to classical, and then how does it depart or how is it different. So just going piece by piece, if you look at it visually, how is it similar? It looks Greek, it looks Hellenistic, it looks natural, it looks beautiful, it looks like a classical Greek work. If you look at her physique, her arms, she almost looks like a male Greek statue. Then how does it depart from the classical? For this, you might say it's religious or it's Christian. And then it says, describe it in the larger iconographic program. That means, how does it relate to the rest of the Sistine Chapel? So there you want to talk about the Sistine Chapel is the story of God's plan. It's on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It begins with the creation of the universe, with the creation of man. Then it goes to where man sins, and then where to man falls. And then what role does she play in here? You could say a Delphic Sibyl is like a psychic. It's a pagan psychic that knows what's going to happen, and she knows God is going to come back. So it's a blend of classical pagan and Judeo-Christian iconography. Another one was on the flood. So this was a question that's, okay, here we go. This would be if they asked about the flood, how is this similar to Greek and Rome? It would be the same answer. The physique would be similar to Greek and Rome. How is the flood both Christian content and classical form? The form is Greek, but the content comes from the Old Testament, from the Bible. It's the story of the flood. How does the flood play in the overall iconographic program of the ceiling? The ceiling tells the story of God's plan from the beginning of the universe to the birth of man, to man's sin, to man making errors and getting punished. And this here, the flood here, shows that man is being punished, but some people will be saved. That will be Noah. He will be saved. All right. And again, you want to know Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael really well. School of Athens, know those all really well. Then here's one on, this would be one on Calling of St. Matthew. This would be an essay on light. And again, if you broke it down, it would be asking you the following things. It would say, here's Calling of St. Matthew. And it would ask you, what's the site? The site would be a church. Intended audience would be Christians or Catholics. Historical milieu background, this would be the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic comeback, the Catholic use of art to persuade people. How did these conditions relate to the use of light? Light is a symbol of God. It's metaphorical of God. And this one here, this symbolizes God in Calling of St. Matthew. What does it represent in the painting? That's Jesus. This light here shows God from Jesus coming from heaven and hitting someone right in the face. It would symbolize the touch of God. How does Caravaggio use the light? tenebrism, bold, dramatic spotlight. Ecstasy of St. Teresa, a similar question. And again, you'd have to break it down. The site, Cornaro Chapel. Audience, the same, Catholics in the church. This one, how is it multimedia? Multimedia means it has sculpture, marble, theater, painting. Almost looks like a stage. It has different types of art. And again, the background conditions, Counter-Reformation, use of arts to make you feel something, to persuade you. Background conditions, use of light, the same for Caravaggio. Light would be God, metaphorically. So here the light comes down and touches St. Teresa. What does light represent in the work? Again, God touching the divine. And how does Bernini use light here? He has the light come in from above, and it comes down from the top, and it illuminates the entire work. The big one here is multimedia. Okay, and that goes through the Baroque.